Have you ever looked up at a monument so massive, so breathtaking, that it feels less like stone and more like something alive, something watching you? High above Rio de Janeiro, stretching its arms wide across the mountains, stands one of the most famous statues in the entire world. Christ the Redeemer, a figure so iconic that even if you've never set foot in Brazil, you've probably seen its silhouette against the clouds. But here's the mystery. Why here? Why this mountain? And why does this enormous figure, built almost a century ago, still leave historians and locals whispering about secrets we can't fully explain? Tonight, we're going to step into the shadow of Christ the Redeemer, not just to admire its size and beauty, but to search for the mysteries that lie within. This is not just a story about a statue. It's about faith, history, and the unexplained threads that connect the past to the present. Imagine for a moment. The year is the early 20th century. Brazil is growing, changing, and struggling to define itself in the modern world. On the surface, the story of Christ the Redeemer seems simple. A monument built to symbolize faith and hope. But when you dig deeper, you find whispers of old legends, strange coincidences, and choices that make you wonder if there was more at play than we've been told. Before we unravel the secrets, let's set the scene. The statue stands on top of Mount Corcovado, a granite peak that rises over 2,300 feet above the city of Rio. From its summit, the entire city unfolds like a living map, beaches curling along the coast, favelas climbing the hillsides, and deep blue waters stretching far into the horizon. From this vantage point, Christ doesn't just overlook Rio, he rules it. But here's where it gets interesting. Long before the statue was built, Corcovado Mountain was a place of significance. Local stories tell of strange lights, eerie winds, and an energy that seemed different from the surrounding peaks. Some claim that even before the first stone of Christ the Redeemer was laid, the mountain was considered sacred. Think about that for a moment. Out of all the places in Brazil, vast jungles, sprawling plains, and endless coastline, the builders chose this mountain. Was it simply practical? Or did they feel something here, something powerful and unseen? Construction began in the 1920s, but the idea of a massive religious monument had been floating around since the 1850s. That's right. Decades earlier, leaders had already been discussing the possibility of raising a colossal statue on Corcovado. But why? Why the obsession with this peak? And why a figure so immense it could be seen from miles away? As the story goes, a French sculptor named Paul Landowski designed the figure, while a Brazilian engineer, Heitor da Silva Costa, led the project. The head was created by Romanian artist Gheorghe Leonida. So, in truth, Christ the Redeemer is not just Brazilian. It's a global effort, pieced together by talents from different corners of the world. Yet, somehow, all these pieces came together in one place, at one time, as though destiny had been waiting for them. But here's something to consider. Statues this large are usually built to honor rulers, conquerors, or victories. Rarely do we see such a figure raised not for kings, but for a spiritual idea. Why did Brazil decide to build the largest Art Deco statue in the world? Not for a president or general, but for Christ. Some believe the answer lies in the turbulent history of Brazil itself. At the time, the country was facing waves of political tension, the rise of modernism, and fears of moral decline. The Catholic Church wanted a symbol to remind the people of their faith, a monument that could not be ignored. But others whisper that there were deeper motives, perhaps a desire to create a guardian, a protector watching not only the city, but the entire nation. Think of the symbolism. Arms outstretched, as if shielding Rio de Janeiro from above. A figure standing taller than any building of its time, as though to say, no matter what happens down below, this figure will endure. But what exactly was it meant to endure? Political unrest? Spiritual decline? Or something even stranger, something yet to come? Now, let's pause for a moment and think about the sheer scale of this project. The statue is nearly 100 feet tall, with an arm span of over 90 feet. It weighs hundreds of tons, and it sits atop a mountain so steep that even reaching the summit is a challenge. In the 1920s, they didn't have the technology we have today. No drones, no modern cranes, just manpower, creativity, and willpower. So how did they pull it off? Workers hauled massive pieces of soapstone and reinforced concrete up winding paths. Some pieces were carried on trains, others lifted by hand. Every inch of the statue had to be carefully measured, cut, and placed. And yet, despite the challenges, construction finished in just 9 years. For a project of this magnitude, in that era, it feels almost miraculous. Some say it was miraculous. There are stories of accidents avoided, storms that passed at just the right time, and an almost eerie smoothness to the construction process. Was it luck? Was it planning? Or was it, as some believers claim, a sign of divine protection over the project? And yet, not everything went smoothly. Over the years, the statue has been struck by lightning multiple times. Whole sections of its face and hands have been damaged and rebuilt. In fact, scientists say the monument is struck by lightning every year. Imagine that. An enormous statue standing on a mountain peak, constantly under attack from the sky, yet still standing tall after nearly a century. Coincidence, or resilience beyond explanation? Let us step back for a moment and think about what Christ the Redeemer means to those who see it. For many, it's a symbol of faith, a reminder of spiritual strength. For others, it's a national treasure, a landmark that defines Brazil on the global stage. But for some, it's more than that. It's a mystery. Why does this statue feel different from so many others? Why does it spark legends, inspire awe, and raise questions that go beyond history and architecture? Some whisper that Christ the Redeemer was built on an ancient site of power, that Corcovado's Peak was chosen not only for its view, but for its energy. Others wonder if the statue's outstretched arms hold hidden meaning, perhaps an ancient symbol disguised in plain sight. And here's something chilling to think about. The statue overlooks Rio with open arms, but from certain angles, its shadow stretches across the city in ways that locals find eerie. On some evenings when the sun hits just right, the shadow seems almost alive, reaching, moving, shifting over the city below. Some say it's just an optical illusion. Others aren't so sure. As we move deeper into this story, remember this. History often leaves us with more questions than answers. And when we stand beneath the giant arms of Christ the Redeemer, we're left to wonder, not just about the history we know, but about the mysteries we don't. So let me ask you, do you believe Christ the Redeemer is simply a masterpiece of engineering and faith? Or could it be something more, a monument connected to forces we don't yet understand? Stay with me, because the deeper we look, the stranger this story becomes. As the sun sets over Rio de Janeiro, the city comes alive with music, color, and motion. But high above, where the winds whisper against the granite cliffs, Christ the Redeemer remains still, silent, watching, and it's in this silence that the strangest stories begin to surface. Locals speak of the statue as if it were more than stone. Some say it breathes. Others claim that at night, when the moonlight strikes its face, the expression shifts ever so slightly, sometimes stern, sometimes sorrowful. Rational minds dismiss this as imagination. Yet the whispers persist, passed down through generations. But the mysteries don't stop at legends. Let's look at the strange coincidences that have surrounded Christ the Redeemer since its earliest days. First, the lightning strikes. As I mentioned before, the statue is hit again and again, year after year. It's so common that engineers have installed protective systems to shield it. But still, the damage keeps coming. In 2014, a lightning bolt chipped away part of the right thumb. Years earlier, its face was scarred. Each time, repairs are made. Each time, the statue seems reborn, almost as if it refuses to be broken. And yet, why is it always this monument? Yes, it stands tall. Yes, it's exposed. But there are other peaks, other towers, other structures in Rio. Why does the fury of the skies seem drawn to Christ the Redeemer? Some call it simple science. Others call it a curse. Then there are the stories of strange lights. Hikers who climb the trails at night report glowing orbs flickering around the summit. Some believe these are reflections from the city below. Others swear they've seen them dart, dance, and disappear into the air. Lights that don't belong to airplanes, lanterns, or stars. Lights that feel alive. Could these be atmospheric illusions? Or could Corcovado's peak hold something more? Some natural energy, or perhaps something even less understood? Let's turn to the mountain itself. Corcovado. In Portuguese, the name means the hunchback, for the way its curved shape rises sharply from the earth. But before Portuguese explorers ever named it, indigenous peoples of the region already held the peak in reverence. Ancient accounts suggest it was seen as a sacred place, a point of connection between the land and the sky. Now, think about that. Long before engineers dreamed of a towering statue, Corcovado was already believed to hold spiritual power. When the church and the government agreed to build Christ the Redeemer there, were they simply choosing a convenient location, or were they unknowingly stepping into a tradition of sacred ground? This leads us to one of the most persistent legends, that Christ the Redeemer was built not only as a religious symbol, but as a guardian, not just of Rio, but of something hidden within the mountain itself. Imagine this: a massive granite peak, solid and immovable. But what if Corcovado is not entirely solid? What if inside there are caverns, chambers, or something left behind by people long before the Portuguese arrived? Some believe that the mountain holds secrets from a lost civilization, artifacts, knowledge, or even ancient shrines that predate Brazil as we know it. And what better way to protect such secrets than to crown the mountain with an enormous statue of Christ himself? Of course, no official record confirms this. But the idea lingers, passed from storyteller to storyteller. And in places where history fades into myth, sometimes the line between fact and legend blurs. Now, let's consider the construction again. The statue was completed in 1931. But what many don't realize is that its original design was different. Early sketches show Christ holding a globe in one hand and a cross in the other, a far more traditional, regal image. But the design was changed. The arms were stretched wide, embracing the city, embracing the world. Why the change? Officially, the open arms symbolized peace and welcome. But some theorists suggest another reason. Arms stretched in such a way could also be seen as forming a cross themselves, a symbol etched not only into the figure, but into the very sky above Rio. Could this have been intentional? A way of creating a massive protective sign visible for miles? And then there's the number. Christ the Redeemer is 98 feet tall, not counting its pedestal. Including the base, it rises to 124 feet. Some believe these numbers are not accidental. Religious scholars point out that the number 12 often represents divine order in Christianity, the 12 apostles, the 12 tribes of Israel. Could the height of the pedestal, 26 feet, carry hidden meaning as well? In Hebrew numerology, 26 is the numerical value of the name of God, Yahweh. Coincidence, or careful symbolism embedded into the statue's very dimensions. Now let's go deeper into the tales of those who visit. Tourists often describe an overwhelming feeling at the summit, not just awe, but something heavier, a strange mix of peace and unease. Some say they feel watched, not only by the statue but by something else, something invisible. Guides speak of travelers who burst into tears for no reason, or fall silent as if words can't form. It's as though the air around the statue carries an energy, something beyond stone and mortar. Skeptics say it's psychology. the altitude, the view, the grandeur playing tricks on the mind. Believers say it's proof of something greater. But whichever side you're on, you can't deny this. Christ the Redeemer is not just seen. It's felt. And then there's one of the strangest events of all. During World War II, Brazil aligned with the Allies. At the time, Rio's harbor became a key point for naval defense. Soldiers stationed there swore that during the darkest days of the war, when news from Europe brought despair, they would look up at the statue and feel renewed. Some claimed that on certain nights, lights would flash across its figure as though it glowed, a beacon in the storm. Was it imagination? Or something else? Another account tells of a pilot who nearly crashed his plane while approaching Rio. At the last moment, he claimed, a sudden updraft lifted his aircraft, pushing him just above Corcovado's peak. When he regained control, he found himself flying past the outstretched arms of Christ the Redeemer, alive only by what he believed was divine intervention. Stories like these may never be proven, but they add layers of mystery, transforming Christ the Redeemer from a monument into a legend. And let's not forget the darker tales. Some say the mountain is cursed, that accidents during construction were hushed up, that strange deaths occurred, though official records remain silent. Others believe the constant lightning strikes are a warning, a sign that the statue was never meant to stand there. But perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in the accidents or the legends, but in the way Christ the Redeemer has endured. Think about it. A century of storms, earthquakes, wars, and political upheaval. And yet the statue remains, arms wide, gaze unbroken. Some monuments crumble, others fade into obscurity. But Christ the Redeemer only grows more famous, more powerful in the minds of those who see it. It's almost as if it was destined to last. And so we're left with questions that tug at both faith and reason. Was Christ the Redeemer built merely as a symbol of Brazil's Catholic roots? Or is it a guardian, a sentinel placed atop a mountain that holds more than we realize? Is it coincidence that lightning, storms, and strange lights seem drawn to it? Or is the statue interacting with forces we don't yet understand? As we continue deeper into this story, we'll explore not only the physical monument, but the theories, the myths, and the unexplained events that make Christ the Redeemer one of the most mysterious wonders of the modern world. Because when you stand beneath those outstretched arms, one thing is certain. You are not just looking at history. You are staring into a mystery that refuses to be solved. So I'll ask you again. Do you think Christ the Redeemer is simply stone and steel? Or could it be something more? Something that watches, protects, and endures for reasons beyond human understanding. Stay with me. The mystery is only beginning. When we look at Christ the Redeemer, we see stone and steel. But beneath the surface, there are layers of meaning, architectural choices, historical decisions, and strange occurrences that make people wonder. Was this statue simply built as a national symbol, or is there something more to the story? Let's start with the most visible evidence, the construction itself. The monument is made of reinforced concrete, clad in soapstone tiles. But here's the strange part. Soapstone is not the most common choice for such a large statue. It's softer, easier to carve, but it's also unusually resistant to heat and weather. Why choose soapstone when Brazil had access to other, stronger materials? Engineers explained it was practical. It allowed for detailed finishing and gave the statue its smooth, pale surface. But some point to a deeper reason. Soapstone, throughout history, has been associated with endurance and protection. Indigenous groups used it for carvings that were meant to last generations. Could the builders have been influenced even unconsciously by this symbolism? And then there's the shape of the arms. Outstretched in a gesture of welcome, yes, but also forming a cross, a protective shield over Rio. Theories suggest the design was deliberately changed from the original sketches to create this living cross, one visible not just from the city below, but from the air above. Think about it. Airplanes were still a relatively new invention in the 1920s, yet the statue was designed to be seen from the skies, almost as though its creators anticipated a world where people would look down from above. Coincidence? Or foresight? Let's move to the geological evidence. Corcovado Mountain is made of granite, a hard, crystalline rock that has stood for millions of years. Granite, interestingly, is often found in sites of ancient monuments around the world. Think of Stonehenge. Think of the pyramids. Think of Mount Rushmore. Could it be that civilizations across time and space were drawn to granite not just for its strength, but for some deeper quality? Some researchers believe granite holds and radiates natural energy due to the quartz within it. Quartz is known to vibrate with electric frequency. It's even used in modern watches and technology. Could it be that Christ the Redeemer's placement on a granite peak makes it more than symbolic? Could it be amplifying energy in ways we don't yet understand? Skeptics shake their heads at such ideas, but they can't deny the unusual stories told by those who visit. Feelings of dizziness, sudden calm, unexplained emotions, all common among travelers who reach the summit. Science might call it psychology, but believers call it presence. And then there's the theory of alignment. Some researchers have studied the positioning of Christ the Redeemer and found curious patterns. On certain days of the year, when the sun rises or sets, its light falls perfectly along the statue's arms, casting shadows that stretch across Rio in precise lines. To the casual eye, it's beautiful. But to those who study sacred geometry, it raises questions. Was the statue positioned intentionally, not just for visibility, but for alignment with the heavens? This is not without precedent. Ancient monuments around the world are aligned with the stars. The pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Mexico, the stone circles of Europe. If ancient builders aligned their monuments with the skies, could modern builders have done the same, perhaps without even realizing the full implications? But here's where things get even stranger. In the 1930s, when the statue was completed, Brazil was not a global power, and yet Christ the Redeemer instantly became a symbol recognized around the world. It was as if the statue carried more weight than stone should allow, as if it was destined to capture global attention. Some historians argue this was propaganda, a way for Brazil to establish cultural influence. Others see it as something more, evidence that the statue had a kind of magnetism, pulling the eyes of the world toward it. Now let's look at the paranormal claims. Over the decades, visitors have reported seeing unexplained phenomena around the statue. Strange lights flickering around its head, shadows that move against the stone, even voices carried on the wind. Guides and workers dismiss these as tricks of the weather, reflections of the city lights, or the sound of air currents. But those who've experienced it firsthand insist it felt real, too real to ignore. One hiker recounted how, while climbing Corcovado at dusk, he saw what looked like a halo glowing above the statue's head. He thought it was the setting sun, but when he looked back minutes later, the glow remained, even though the sun had disappeared below the horizon. Another story tells of maintenance workers who, while repairing lightning damage, swore they heard whispers, soft, low, echoing through the stone. They laughed it off at the time. But years later, when interviewed, some admitted they never forgot the sound. Is it imagination? Or is the statue holding something deeper than we know? And then there are the global connections. Christ the Redeemer is often compared to other colossal statues: the Statue of Liberty in New York, the Motherland Calls in Russia, the Great Buddha in China. Each of these monuments, in their own way, represents more than stone. They represent ideals, nations, or spiritual truths. But Christ the Redeemer stands apart. It is not tied to politics, war, or conquest. It is tied to something eternal, faith, which brings us to another theory, that the statue is more than a symbol. It is a beacon, a point of connection between the earthly and the divine. Now, let's consider something more unsettling. Some theorists believe Christ the Redeemer was built not only to protect Rio, but to guard against something. Think of the arms, not only embracing, but shielding. Could the statue have been placed there as a barrier, a warning, or even a seal? A way of saying, whatever lies within or beneath must not escape. This ties back to the legends of hidden chambers within Corcovado. Official surveys have found no such spaces. But the mountain is vast, and granite can conceal secrets for millennia. Could there be forgotten tombs, lost artifacts, or ancient structures deep inside the mountain? And if so, what role does Christ the Redeemer play in keeping them hidden? Before dismissing this idea, remember, throughout history, monuments have often been placed on sites of power, churches on old temples, temples on older shrines, each new generation building upon the sacred ground of those before them. What if Christ the Redeemer is simply the latest layer in a chain, stretching back to a civilization long forgotten? And here's something else to ponder. The statue is hollow. Inside, there's a small chapel dedicated to Our Lady of Aparecida, the patron saint of Brazil. This chapel can host weddings, baptisms, and prayers, but its existence raises questions. Why place a chapel inside a statue on a mountain so hard to reach? Why not at the base, where it would be more accessible? Could it be symbolic, an inner sanctum, a hidden heart of the monument itself? Believers see it as beautiful. Theorists see it as intentional, a sacred space within stone. As we pull these threads together, we see a pattern emerging. Soapstone chosen for endurance, granite chosen for strength, arms stretched wide, forming a cross visible from the skies, alignments with sun and shadow, a chapel hidden within, legends of lights, whispers, and protection. One detail might be coincidence. Two, perhaps design. But when the evidence piles up, we begin to wonder, was Christ the Redeemer built with a purpose greater than we realize? And so, the mystery deepens. Was this statue merely a monument of faith? Or was it carefully crafted as a guardian, an amplifier, a beacon of something unseen? As night falls over Rio, the statue glows softly under floodlights, its pale surface shining against the dark. To millions, it is comfort. To others, it is warning. And to us, it is a question we may never fully answer. So I'll turn it to you. When you see Christ the Redeemer, do you see only art and engineering? Or do you see a mystery that still waits, unsolved, above the city of Rio? Stay with me, because in the next chapter we'll explore the most powerful theories, evidence from history, and the unanswered questions that keep Christ the Redeemer one of the most enigmatic wonders of the world. When we talk about Christ the Redeemer, we often see it as unique, a one-of-a-kind monument rising above Rio de Janeiro. But here is something you may not have considered. What if you part of a much larger pattern? A network of wonders scattered across the globe, each carrying mysteries of their own. Think about it. Humanity has always built colossal figures to stand watch over the land. From the Sphinx in Egypt to the Moai statues of Easter Island. From the Great Buddha in Japan to the Statue of Liberty in New York, giant figures carved in stone or cast in metal, towering over cities, deserts, and oceans. Why? Why do so many civilizations, across thousands of years and thousands of miles, share this same instinct, to raise enormous guardians that seem to speak to the sky? Christ the Redeemer may be one of the most modern examples of this ancient tradition, but perhaps it isn't separate at all. Perhaps it belongs to that same chain of guardians, connected by purpose, even if separated by time. And here's where things grow strange. Scholars who study sacred geography have noticed something intriguing. Many of these colossal figures align with natural landmarks, energy lines, or even one another. The Great Pyramids of Egypt align with Orion's belt. Stonehenge aligns with solstices. The Moai of Easter Island face outward, guarding against unseen forces. Could Christ the Redeemer, as placement on Corcovado, be another piece of this puzzle? Its outstretched arms not only blessing the city, but marking a point in a hidden map that stretches across the earth. Skeptics dismiss this as coincidence. But think of the scale. How many coincidences add up to a pattern? Now, let's turn to the myths themselves. In Brazil, whispers of hidden secrets within Corcovado have never fully faded. Some speak of tunnels running deep into the granite, leading to chambers untouched for centuries. Others suggest that ancient peoples may have worshipped on the mountaintop long before Europeans arrived, using it as a sacred site to honor the gods of the sky. Could Christ the Redeemer have been unknowingly built on top of an older place of power? This would not be unusual. Around the world, holy sites are layered like pages of history. Cathedrals built on top of pagan temples. Temples built on top of older shrines. Again and again, humanity seems drawn back to the same sacred spots, as though these places call to us across the ages. Could Corcovado be one of them? And then there are the darker theories. Some claim that Christ the Redeemer isn't just a guardian, but a seal, a monument placed not to protect the people, but to contain something beneath, something ancient, something forgotten. Legends in Rio speak of restless spirits, of energies that rise with the mist at dawn. Could the statue, with its arms spread wide, be more than a symbol of peace? Could it be a barrier, holding back forces better left undisturbed? It may sound far-fetched. But remember, the builders changed the original design. Instead of holding objects, Christ's arms were stretched wide as though shielding. Why? Was it only aesthetic? Or was there an unspoken sense that the figure needed to cover, to block, to defend? Let's compare this to other monuments. The Statue of Liberty in New York was gifted by France as a symbol of freedom. Yet, when you look closer, you see layers of symbolism drawn from ancient myths, the torch of knowledge, the crown of rays echoing the sun gods of antiquity. The Moai of Easter Island stare outward as if watching for danger, their backs to the island as though protecting it. The Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, once stood with arms raised, a figure of protection over the harbor. Do you see the pattern? Again and again, across cultures, across centuries, humanity builds guardians, protectors, watchers. Christ the Redeemer fits this pattern almost too perfectly. Now let's move to the global impact. Since its unveiling in 1931, the statue has become one of the most recognized monuments in the world. But why did it gain such power so quickly? The Eiffel Tower was older. The Statue of Liberty was taller. The pyramids were far more ancient. And yet, Christ the Redeemer instantly joined their ranks, as though it had been destined to stand among the greatest wonders of the earth. Was it timing? Was it symbolism? Or was it something deeper? Something in the human spirit that recognized the statue as part of a much larger mystery? Consider this. When UNESCO named it a World Heritage Site, they didn't just call it a monument. They called it a symbol of cultural exchange, of shared humanity. And yet, beneath the official words lies something more difficult to explain. Why does this statue, more than most others, inspire not just pride, but awe, even among those who don't share the faith it represents? Some argue it's the sheer scale. Others point to the beauty of Rio, the way the statue crowns the landscape like a jewel. But many who visit describe a feeling beyond reason, a sensation of standing in the presence of something greater, something unseen. Could this be coincidence? Or is Christ the Redeemer more than stone, a channel for something deeper? And here's where modern science adds fuel to the fire. As mentioned earlier, granite contains quartz, a mineral capable of storing and transmitting energy. When lightning strikes the statue, and it does dozens of times each year, massive electrical energy surges through the figure and into the mountain. What happens to that energy? Scientists say it dissipates, but others suggest it may be stored, radiated or even amplified by the quartz within Corcovado. In other words, each lightning strike could be charging the mountain like a battery. Now imagine this: a colossal statue of Christ, arms outstretched, struck again and again by lightning. To the eye, it's dramatic. But to the unseen, could it be something else? Could Christ the Redeemer be acting like an antenna, channeling energy between earth and sky? If so, was this accidental or intentional? We may never know, but the theory lingers. And then there's the most unsettling thought of all. If the statue is a guardian, a beacon, or even a seal, what happens if it's ever destroyed? Would it release what it contains? Would it remove the protection it offers? We've seen monuments fall before: the Colossus of Rhodes, toppled by earthquakes; the Buddhas of Bamiyan, destroyed in war. When guardians fall, what do they release into the world? Perhaps it's nothing. Perhaps it's only stone. But perhaps, just perhaps, Christ the Redeemer's endurance is not accidental. Perhaps it stands because it must stand. And so we return to the central question. Christ the Redeemer, a masterpiece of faith and engineering, or part of a chain of guardians, each placed on sacred ground, each tied to mysteries humanity has not yet unraveled? As night deepens in Rio, the statue glows like a phantom above the city. Planes pass by, tourists take photos, children point in wonder. But behind the awe, the legends linger. And for every explanation, a new question rises. Why this mountain? Why this design? Why this endurance? Coincidence or purpose? The answer may never be clear. But one thing is certain: Christ the Redeemer is not just a statue. It is a question carved in stone, arms open wide, daring us to look closer, to wonder deeper, to ask again and again, what is really being protected here? Stay with me, because in the final chapter we'll bring everything together: history, faith, legends, and theories, to ask the ultimate question. What does Christ the Redeemer truly mean? We've journeyed through history, myth, and mystery. We've stood in the shadow of Christ the Redeemer and asked questions most people never think to ask. And now, as we reach the end of this story, the truth becomes clear. Christ the Redeemer is not just a monument. It is a riddle carved in stone, watching over Rio de Janeiro for nearly a century. But what does this riddle mean? Let's take one final look. On the surface, the story is simple. In the early 20th century, Brazil wanted a symbol of faith and unity. The Catholic Church and the government joined forces. Artists and engineers from around the world came together, and in 1931, Christ the Redeemer was unveiled, standing nearly 100 feet tall, arms outstretched overlooking one of the most beautiful cities on earth. That's the official history. Clear, factual, easy to follow, but the deeper we've looked, the more we've seen cracks in that surface. Strange choices, unexplained events, whispered legends. Why was soapstone chosen? A material with unusual endurance. Why was the statue built on Corcovado, a mountain already seen as sacred by those who came before? Why did the design change from a globe and cross to outstretched arms, arms forming a cross, arms shielding the city? Why does lightning strike the statue again and again, as though drawn to it, charging it with energy from the skies? And why, through all of this, does Christ the Redeemer remain? Perhaps it is chance, perhaps it is faith, or perhaps it is something more. Think about how humanity has always built guardians. The Sphinx, the Moai, the Colossus, the Statue of Liberty, all massive figures watching, protecting, reminding us of forces greater than ourselves. Christ the Redeemer fits perfectly into this pattern, a modern echo of an ancient instinct. Some believe it is a beacon, sending a message skyward. Others believe it is a shield, holding back what lies beneath. Still, others see it as an amplifier, channeling the energy of the mountain into something beyond our understanding. Which theory is right? We may never know, but all of them lead to the same conclusion. Christ the Redeemer is more than stone. It is a symbol layered with meaning, both human and mysterious. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the statue was never meant to give us answers. Maybe it was meant to ask questions. Questions about faith, about power, about what we choose to build and why. Questions that linger in the mind long after you leave the mountain. Because when you stand at the base of Christ the Redeemer, gazing up at its towering figure, one thing is certain. You feel small. And in that smallness, you feel connected. To history, to mystery, to something beyond yourself. That's the real power of Christ the Redeemer. It doesn't solve the mystery. It is the mystery. So, what do you think? Is this statue simply a masterpiece of Art Deco engineering, standing as a symbol of Brazil's faith and culture? Or is it something more, part of a global pattern of guardians, a beacon of hidden energy, a riddle carved in stone that refuses to be solved? Whatever you believe, one thing is undeniable. Christ the Redeemer is one of the greatest wonders of our world, not because we understand it, but because we don't. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest secret of all. So the next time you see its image, arms open wide against the sky, remember the questions. Remember the mysteries. Remember that some stories are not meant to end. And if you've made it this far into our journey, I'd like to invite you to keep exploring with us. Like this video, if it sparked your curiosity, share it with someone who loves history, mystery, and the wonders of our world. And, most importantly, join the conversation.